The massive ships hung in space like dark metal mountains against the stars. Each one was bigger than anything humans had ever built. The Vexharan Empire fleet stretched across the void, their hull plating gleaming with an alien blue-green shimmer that hurt human eyes to look at directly. Admiral Sarah. Chen stood on the bridge of the orbital defense platform, humanity's last stand. Through the reinforced viewing port, she could see Earth below, its blue and white surface looking peaceful despite the war that had raged for 3 years. The planet seemed so small compared to the alien fleet that surrounded it. "Admiral, they're moving into final attack position," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres from his station. His voice was steady, but Chen could hear the tension underneath. They all knew what was coming. Chen nodded. She had expected this moment for months now. The Vexharan Empire had been systematically destroying human colonies across known space. Mars had fallen 6 months ago. The Outer Rim settlements had been wiped out a year before that. Now only Earth remained, protected by this single orbital platform and a handful of ships that were no match for the alien armada. "Any word from the surface?" Chen asked. "President Morrison sends his regards," Torres replied. "The evacuation ships are still loading civilians from the major cities." Chen almost smiled at that. The evacuation ships were real enough, but they were not heading where the Vexharan thought they were. Everything had to look exactly right for the plan to work. A new voice crackled over the communication system. It was deep and harsh, speaking accented English through translation software. "Human defenders, this is Fleet Commander Kethvar of the Vexharan Imperial Navy. You will surrender immediately or be destroyed." Chen picked up the communication device. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen, commanding officer of this station. We request terms for surrender." There was a pause. Then the alien voice returned, sounding surprised. "You wish to surrender? We know when we are beaten, Commander. We request safe passage for our civilian population." Another pause, longer this time. The Vexharan had conquered 47 different species over the past 1,000 years. Most fought to the bitter end, requiring complete destruction before they would yield. Humans were apparently different. "You will prepare to receive a boarding party," Kethvar finally replied. "All weapons will be powered down. Any resistance will result in the immediate destruction of your platform and bombardment of the planet below." "Understood," Chen replied. She looked around the bridge at her crew. They were all watching her, waiting for orders. These men and women had followed her through 3 years of the most brutal war humanity had ever fought. They deserved to know what was really happening. "All stations, stand down weapons," she announced. "Prepare to receive boarders." The crew began shutting down the defense systems. Chen watched the tactical displays go dark one by one. On the screens showing the Vexharan fleet, she could see smaller ships detaching from the main vessels. Transport craft heading for the platform. 20 minutes later, the first aliens stepped onto the bridge. Chen had seen Vexharan before, in intelligence reports and battlefield recordings, but never this close. They were tall, nearly 8 feet in height, with elongated limbs and gray-green skin that seemed to shimmer like their ship hulls. Their faces were vaguely humanoid but wrong somehow, with 2 large eyes that reflected light like a cat's, and mouths full of sharp teeth. The one in the lead wore elaborate armor marked with command insignia. He looked around the bridge with those unsettling eyes before focusing on Chen. "You are the human commander?" His English was better than the voice over the radio, though still heavily accented. "Admiral Sarah Chen, yes. I am War Master Zexthul. You will come with us. Your emperor wishes to see the human leader." Chen nodded. She had expected this too. The Vexharan loved their surrender ceremonies. It was part of how they maintained control over their vast empire, making conquered species formally submit before their ruler. The journey to the Vexharan flagship took an hour in one of their shuttlecraft. Chen sat quietly between 2 guards, looking out at the alien fleet around them. Each ship bristled with weapons that could turn a planet to ash. The engineering was impressive, she had to admit. Humanity had nothing that could match it. The flagship was enormous, even by Vexharan standards. Chen estimated it was nearly 30 miles long, with sections that could house entire cities. The shuttle bay they landed in was larger than most human space stations. More guards escorted her through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. The ceilings were impossibly high, the walls covered with displays showing the many worlds the Empire had conquered. Chen recognized some of them from intelligence reports, species that had once controlled significant portions of the galaxy. now reduced to subject peoples serving Vexharan interests. The throne room was the size of a sports stadium. At the far end, on a raised dais that required climbing hundreds of steps, sat Emperor Zarthek himself. Chen had studied everything humanity's intelligence services knew about the Vexharan ruler. He was over 600 years old, had personally commanded the conquest of 23 species, and was considered a military genius by his own people. He was also, according to the psychological profiles, completely convinced of Vexharan superiority over all other life forms. The Emperor was even larger than the other Vexharan Chen had seen, nearly 9 feet tall even while seated. His skin had a darker tint that apparently came with age, and his eyes held an intelligence that was definitely not human. Those eyes watched her approach with what might have been amusement. "So," Zarthek said when Chen reached the base of the dais. His voice carried easily across the vast space. "The leader of the humans comes to surrender at last. I am Ambassador Sarah Chen," she replied, using her diplomatic title rather than her military rank. "I speak for humanity in this matter, Ambassador." The Emperor seemed genuinely surprised. "Not a general or admiral? I am both, Your Imperial Majesty. But today I come as a diplomat." Zarthek leaned forward in his throne. "How refreshing. Most species send their war leaders to surrender. You send a diplomat. Perhaps humans are more civilized than we assumed." Chen said nothing to that. Around the throne room, she could see hundreds of Vexharan nobles and military officers watching the proceedings. This was being recorded, she knew, for broadcast across the Empire. Another conquered species brought low before Vexharan might. "Your resistance was adequate," the Emperor continued. "For a species so young and primitive, you fought longer than expected. But now you see the futility of opposing our empire. What terms do you request for your surrender?" This was the moment Chen had been preparing for. Everything depended on how she handled the next few minutes. "We accept defeat, Your Imperial Majesty. Humanity cannot stand against the might of your empire. We ask only for mercy for our civilians and the right to preserve our culture under your rule." The Emperor nodded approvingly. This was exactly what he expected to hear. The same words, more or less, that 46 other species had spoken in this very room. "Reasonable requests," Zarthek said. "Your species will be relocated to worlds better suited for your development under Imperial guidance. Your military forces will be disbanded. Your leaders will be replaced by Imperial governors. In time, your people will learn to appreciate the benefits of Vexharan civilization." "We understand, Your Imperial Majesty." "Good." The Emperor sat back in his throne. "Then let us proceed with the formal ceremony of submission." The ceremony was elaborate and humiliating, designed to break the spirit of conquered peoples. Chen was required to kneel, to formally renounce humanity's independence and to pledge eternal loyalty to the Vexharan Empire. She performed each ritual exactly as instructed, her face showing nothing but resigned acceptance. The assembled Vexharan nobles made approving noises. Another species properly brought to heel. Another world added to their vast empire. The recordings would be broadcast across Vexharan space, showing their subjects that resistance was futile. As the ceremony concluded, Emperor Zarthek rose from his throne. "Ambassador Chen, you have shown wisdom in accepting the inevitable. Your species will be treated fairly under Imperial rule." Chen stood as well. For a moment, she and the alien Emperor looked at each other across the space between them. Then she spoke, her voice carrying clearly in the vast throne room. "Your Imperial Majesty, before I am taken to whatever fate awaits me, I would like to say something." Zarthek tilted his head, curious. "Speak." Chen took a step forward. When she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. But in the silence of the throne room, every word was audible. "The only rule that matters is the one you break when your survival depends on it." For a moment, the throne room was completely silent. Then Emperor Zarthek began to laugh, a harsh sound that echoed off the high ceiling. "Cryptic words from a defeated enemy," he said. "Is this some human attempt at wisdom?" Chen smiled for the first time since entering the throne room. "Not wisdom, Your Imperial Majesty. A warning." The laughter died on the Emperor's lips, something in Chen's tone, in the way she stood, in the confidence that suddenly radiated from her, made him uneasy. "What warning?" he demanded. But Chen said nothing more. She simply stood there, that slight smile on her face, as if she knew something the most powerful being in the galaxy did not. The guards stepped forward to escort her away, but Zarthek held up a hand to stop them. He stared down at the human diplomat, those alien eyes trying to read something in her expression. "What rule?" he asked again, his voice quieter now. Chen looked up at him one last time. "The one that says you should always make sure your enemy is actually defeated before you celebrate victory." The guards led her away then, leaving Emperor Zarthek standing alone on his dais, staring at the doors through which she had disappeared. Around him, his nobles and officers began to murmur among themselves, uncertain what they had just witnessed. In the shuttle bay, as Chen was placed aboard a transport that would take her to an Imperial prison ship, she looked out one last time at the Vexharan fleet. Thousands of ships, millions of soldiers, the combined might of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for a millennium. They thought they had won. Chen closed her eyes and thought about all the messages that were even now racing across space at faster-than-light speeds, coded transmissions to sleeper agents who had been waiting for years for this moment, activation orders for operations that had been planned for decades. The Vexharan had indeed won the war they thought they were fighting, but they had never understood what war humanity was actually prepared to fight. The transport ship pulled away from the flagship, carrying Chen toward an uncertain future. Behind her, the Vexharan fleet began to disperse, heading for their various assignments across human space. They would secure the conquered worlds, establish garrison forces, and begin the process of integrating another species into their empire. It would take them weeks to realize that something was wrong. By then, it would be far too late. The prison ship subjugator was exactly what Chen had expected from Vexharan engineering. Efficient, functional, and designed to break the spirit of anyone confined within its hull. Her cell was a small cube of metal walls with a single bench and basic sanitation facilities. The lighting never changed, creating an eternal artificial day that was meant to disorient prisoners. Chen didn't mind. She had spent worse nights in worse places during her years as both a diplomat and an intelligence operative. She sat on the bench with her back against the wall and waited. She didn't have to wait long. 3 days after her capture, the cell door slid open with a soft hiss. 2 guards entered, followed by a Vexharan she didn't recognize. This one was shorter than most, with darker skin and scars across his face that suggested significant combat experience. "I am Interrogator Velkus," he said without preamble. "You will answer my questions." Chen looked up at him calmly. "I've already surrendered, Interrogator. What more do you need to know?" Velkus studied her for a moment. "Your words to the Emperor have caused concern in certain quarters. Explain their meaning." "They meant exactly what they sounded like," Chen replied. "A philosophical observation about the nature of survival. The Emperor does not believe you are being entirely truthful." Chen shrugged. "The Emperor is free to believe whatever he chooses. I'm just a diplomat from a defeated species." The interrogation continued for 2 hours. Velkus was skilled at his job, Chen had to admit. He asked questions from multiple angles, trying to catch her in contradictions or trick her into revealing information she shouldn't have. But Chen had been trained for this scenario by some of the best intelligence professionals humanity had ever produced. When it was over, Velkus looked frustrated. "You are hiding something, human." "I'm hiding lots of things," Chen admitted cheerfully. "My personal opinions about your empire's interior decorating choices, for instance. But nothing that would be of strategic value to your forces." The Vexharan interrogator left without another word. Chen settled back onto her bench and closed her eyes. Phase 1 was complete. Now came the waiting. On the bridge of the flagship Emperor's Will, Zarthek stood before a massive holographic display showing the current positions of his fleets across human space. Green icons marked Vexharan forces, while red dots showed the locations of former human colonies and military installations. "Report," he commanded. Fleet Commander Kethvar stepped forward. "The occupation of Earth is proceeding smoothly, Your Imperial Majesty. Our ground forces have encountered no resistance. The human government buildings have been secured, and the population centers are under our control." "And the other human worlds?" "Similarly peaceful, Majesty. Mars, Europa, the asteroid mining stations, all secured without incident. It appears the humans truly have accepted defeat." Zarthek nodded, but something continued to bother him. The human diplomat's words echoed in his mind. "The only rule that matters is the one you break when your survival depends on it." "What of their military forces?" he asked. "Scattered and in retreat, Majesty. Our pursuit fleets are hunting down the remaining ships, but they appear to be fleeing toward the outer rim of human space." Standard behavior for a broken military. And prisoners. Kethvar hesitated slightly. Fewer than expected, Majesty. Many of the human ships we destroyed showed signs of minimal crew aboard. We assumed they had already evacuated non-essential personnel. This was not unusual. Most species reduced crew sizes on their ships when facing inevitable defeat, trying to preserve as many lives as possible. But combined with the Diplomat's cryptic warning, it made Zarthek uneasy. Double the security protocols on all occupied worlds, he ordered. I want constant monitoring of all human populations. Any sign of resistance is to be reported immediately. Yes, Your Imperial Majesty. As Kethvar left to implement the orders, Zarthek turned back to the holographic display. The conquest had gone almost too smoothly. In his 6 centuries of military experience, he had learned to be suspicious of easy victories. Meanwhile, in a secure facility on Europa, a Vex-Haran communications officer named Draknell was processing routine intelligence reports from across the newly conquered human territories. Draknell had been assigned to monitor human communications networks, looking for signs of underground resistance movements. What he was finding didn't make sense. Supervisor, he called to his superior, I'm seeing anomalies in the human data networks. Supervisor Thexmar walked over to Draknell's station. What kind of anomalies? Traffic patterns that don't match normal civilian usage. Encrypted packets being routed through systems that should have been shut down during the conquest. It's subtle, but it's there. Thexmar frowned. Show me. Draknell brought up a series of displays showing network traffic across human space. At first glance, everything looked normal. The usual communications between family members, business transactions, entertainment downloads. But when the analysis software highlighted the anomalies, a different pattern emerged. There, Draknell pointed. These data bursts are too regular to be random, and they're all being routed through secondary relay stations that aren't even supposed to be active anymore. Could it be automatic systems that haven't been shut down yet? I don't think so, Supervisor. The timing is too precise. Someone is coordinating this traffic. Thexmar studied the displays for several minutes. Increase monitoring on these networks. If there's an underground resistance movement forming, we need to identify it quickly. But Draknell was already shaking his head. That's what doesn't make sense, Supervisor. If this is resistance communications, why isn't it better hidden? Any competent intelligence officer would encrypt this traffic more thoroughly. It's almost like what? Like they want us to find it. Across human space, similar reports were beginning to filter up through Vex-Haran command structures. Strange readings from sensor networks, anomalous energy signatures from abandoned human facilities, ships detected at the edge of sensor range that disappeared when investigated. None of it was threatening. None of it suggested immediate danger. But all of it was wrong somehow, like pieces of a puzzle that didn't quite fit together. On board the subjugator, Chen received her daily meal from a guard who had been working the prison detail for 3 weeks. The guard's name was Kexmol, and he was young for a Vex-Haran, probably less than a century old. He was also curious about humans, which made him useful for Chen's purposes. Tell me, Kexmol, Chen said as the guard set down her food tray. How many species has the Empire conquered in your lifetime? Kexmol hesitated. Prisoners weren't supposed to engage the guards in conversation. But Chen had been nothing but polite and non-threatening since her capture. 4, he admitted. The Zektar resistance was put down when I was 60 years old. Then the Mistral Dan, the Heptari, and now your species. Were they difficult conquests? The Zektar were stubborn. They fought for almost a decade before surrendering. The Mistral Dan surrendered quickly, but then tried to rebel twice afterward. We had to relocate their entire population to prison worlds. Chen nodded thoughtfully. And what happened to their military forces? Destroyed or disbanded, like all conquered militaries. All of them. Kexmol looked uncertain. What do you mean? I mean, were there ever any cases where a military appeared to be destroyed but actually wasn't? The young guard shifted uncomfortably. I wouldn't know about such things. I'm just a prison guard, Chen smiled. Of course. I was just curious about military history. It's a hobby of mine. After Kexmol left, Chen lay down on her bench and stared at the ceiling. The seed was planted. Now she needed to wait for it to grow. On the flagship bridge, Emperor Zarthek was reviewing the daily reports from his occupation forces when Admiral Kexvar approached with a troubled expression. Your Imperial Majesty, We've received some concerning intelligence reports. Concerning how? Our forces are reporting unusual activity across human space. Nothing directly threatening, but patterns that don't match normal post-conquest behavior. Zarthek turned away from the tactical displays. Explain. Communications traffic that appears to be coordinated but serves no obvious purpose. Energy readings from facilities that should be abandoned. Ship movements at the edge of our sensor coverage. Individual incidents could be explained away but taken together. You suspect organized resistance. I don't know what to suspect, Majesty. That's what concerns me. In all our previous conquests, resistance movements have been obvious. Underground cells trying to hide their activities. Refugee populations attempting to escape to neutral space. Military units regrouping for guerrilla warfare. This is different. Zarthek was quiet for a long moment. Bring me the human diplomat. Majesty? The one called Chen. Bring her here. An hour later, Chen stood once again in the Emperor's throne room, flanked by guards. This time the vast space was nearly empty, except for Zarthek himself and a handful of senior officers. Ambassador Chen, the Emperor said without preamble, my forces are reporting anomalous activities across human space. You will explain them. Chen looked genuinely puzzled. What kind of activities, Your Imperial Majesty? Communications traffic. Energy signatures, ship movements, all coordinated, all purposeless. I'm afraid I don't understand. I've been in your custody for over a week now. How would I know what's happening in human space? Zarthek leaned forward in his throne. You will tell me the meaning of your words. The rule you spoke of. What did you mean? Chen was quiet for a moment, as if considering her answer carefully. Your Imperial Majesty, may I ask you a question? Speak. In all your conquests and all the species you've defeated, have you ever encountered one that didn't fight the way you expected them to? The Emperor's eyes narrowed. What do you mean? I mean a species that understood they couldn't win a conventional war, so they chose to fight a different kind of war entirely. The silence in the throne room was absolute. Around the Emperor, his officers exchanged uncertain glances. What different kind of war? Zarthek asked, his voice deadly quiet. Chen met his gaze directly. The kind where losing the battles is part of winning the war. Explain. Your Imperial Majesty, you've spent 3 years destroying our fleets, conquering our worlds, and demonstrating your overwhelming superiority. You've won every engagement, captured every objective, and achieved every strategic goal you set for yourself. Yes. But did you ever wonder why it was so easy? The Emperor said nothing, but Chen could see understanding beginning to dawn in those alien eyes. You see, Your Imperial Majesty, the rule I spoke of isn't about breaking laws or violating treaties. It's about breaking assumptions. You assumed we were fighting the same war you were fighting. You assumed we wanted to defeat your fleets in battle, hold our territory, and maintain our independence through military force. Chen took a step closer to the throne. But what if those weren't our objectives at all? What if everything you've seen, our resistance, our retreats, our final surrender, was exactly what we wanted you to see? The Emperor rose from his throne, towering over Chen even at this distance. What are you saying? I'm saying, Your Imperial Majesty, that the easiest way to get inside a fortress is to be invited in. For a moment that seemed to last forever, Emperor Zarthek stared down at the human diplomat. Then he turned to his officers. Send immediate orders to all fleet commanders. Full security protocols, deep scans of all occupied territories. I want every human accounted for. Every facility searched, every anomaly investigated. Yes, Majesty, the officers replied, hurrying from the throne room. When they were alone except for the guards, Zarthek looked back at Chen. If you are attempting to deceive me, I'm not attempting anything, Your Imperial Majesty. I'm just a diplomat from a defeated species, remember? What could I possibly do against the might of your empire? But as the guards led her away, Chen's slight smile told a different story. The Emperor watched her go, a growing sense of unease settling in his ancient mind. Across the galaxy, Vexharan forces began implementing emergency security protocols. They didn't yet know what they were looking for, but they were beginning to understand that they might not have won the war they thought they had. The rule had been spoken. Now it was time to see what happened when an empire discovered that its greatest victory might actually be its greatest defeat. The first sign that something was wrong came from the mining station on Kepler 442 Beta Commander. Yexadal was reviewing the daily production reports when his communications officer approached with a confused expression. The mining station had been one of humanity's major industrial centers before the conquest, and the Vex Haran had been eager to put its mineral extraction facilities back into operation under Imperial control. Commander, we're receiving strange readings from the lower mining levels. What kind of readings, Lieutenant? Power signatures that don't match our equipment specifications. The humans said they shut down all non-essential systems when they evacuated, but these readings suggest active machinery. Yexdal frowned. Send a team to investigate. 3 hours later, the investigation team returned with news that made no sense. Commander, reported Sergeant Mexthor, the entire lower section of the mining complex is operational. Full power active systems automated extraction continuing at normal rates. That's impossible. Our engineers confirmed that the humans had shut down all mining operations before we arrived. That's what we thought too, sir. But the extraction logs show continuous operation for the past 6 months. The humans never stopped mining. Yexdal stared at the sergeant. Where's the extracted material going? That's the strange part, Commander. According to the shipping manifests, regular cargo transports have been moving the materials off-world every 2 weeks. But we have no record of any ships leaving this system since our occupation began. Show me. Yexdal and his team descended into the lower levels of the mining complex. What they found defied all their assumptions about the human surrender. The entire facility was running at full capacity, with automated systems extracting and processing rare metals at an impressive rate. The equipment was clearly human in design, but it was more advanced than anything in Vexharan intelligence reports. How long has this been running? Yexdal asked the facility's computer system. Continuous operation for 6 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days. The computer replied in accented but perfect Vexharan. Who authorized this operation? Mining Directive 77 Alpha. Authorized by Colonial Administrator Chen. Priority Classification Ultra. Yexdal felt something cold settle in his stomach. What is Mining Directive 77 Alpha? Classified information. Access restricted to ultra-priority personnel only. The Vexharan commander tried every access code he had, but the computer refused to provide more information. Whoever had programmed these systems had anticipated Vexharan occupation and planned accordingly. Send an immediate report to Fleet Command. Yexdal ordered. We need technical specialists down here immediately. Similar reports were flooding in from across human space. On Europa, Vexharan forces discovered that the ice processing plants had never actually stopped operation. On Mars, the terraforming installations were running complex atmospheric processing programs that weren't in any human technical manual. On dozens of colony worlds, infrastructure that was supposed to be shut down was operating at full capacity. But the most disturbing discovery came from the shipyards orbiting. Earth's moon Admiral Kexvar personally led the investigation team that boarded the Luna construction facility. According to their intelligence, the shipyard had been evacuated and shut down before the final battle. The massive construction bays should have been empty, the fabrication systems offline. Instead, they found a fully operational shipbuilding complex. This is impossible, muttered Chief Engineer Dex Moll as they walked through the main construction bay. The power requirements alone should have been detected by our sensors. The bay stretched for miles in every direction, its ceiling disappearing into shadows high above. But what caught their attention were the construction frames, massive skeletal structures designed to hold ships during assembly. The frames weren't empty. Admiral, called one of the scan technicians. I'm reading significant metallic structures in these frames. Large ones. Kexvar ordered the bay's lighting systems activated. As the massive floods came online, they revealed the impossible truth. The construction frames held ships. Not human ships as they knew them, but vessels of a design that didn't appear in any intelligence database. They were sleek, angular craft that seemed to blend human and alien engineering principles in ways that should have been impossible. How many? Kexavar asked quietly. The scan technician checked his readings twice before answering. 47 ships in this bay alone, Admiral. And there are 12 more construction bays in this facility. All occupied? Scanning now, sir. A pause.
Yes, Admiral.
Every bay is full. I'm reading over 500 ships in various stages of completion. Kexvar felt the same cold dread that was spreading through Vexharan command structures across the galaxy. What classes of vessels? Unknown, sir. The designs don't match anything in our databases, but based on size and configuration. The technician's voice trailed off. Report, Lieutenant. Admiral, these appear to be warships. Capital ships. Some of them are larger than our own heavy cruisers. The investigation continued for hours. The ships were indeed warships, built with technology that seemed decades ahead of anything humanity had displayed during the war. The construction was clearly human. The design aesthetics and engineering, philosophy were unmistakable, but the materials and systems were far more advanced than Vex Heron intelligence had believed possible. But the most chilling discovery came when they accessed the facility's construction logs, Admiral, reported the data specialist. According to these records, construction began on these ships 8 years ago, long before the war started. 8 years? That's impossible. Our intelligence services would have detected a buildup of this magnitude. Sir, I'm reading work orders for materials and components sourced from across human space. Mining operations, manufacturing facilities, research installations, it's all here. They've been building a fleet in secret for nearly a decade. Kexvar studied the construction logs with growing horror. The scope of the operation was staggering. Dozens of facilities across human space had been secretly contributing to this project. Materials had been moved through a complex network of civilian transports and private shipping companies. The entire operation had been hidden in plain sight, disguised as normal commercial and industrial activity. How many ships total? He asked. The data specialist's hands were shaking as he compiled the information. Preliminary estimates suggest over 2,000 vessels, Admiral. Various classes, from fast attack craft to ships that appear to be super dreadnoughts. Where are they now? Unknown, sir. The logs show that the last ships were moved out of these facilities 6 months ago, just before our invasion began. Kexvar immediately sent an emergency communication to Emperor Zarthek. The message was brief but carried implications that shook the Imperial command structure to its core. Your Imperial Majesty, we have discovered that humanity possesses a secret fleet of advanced warships. Numbers unknown, location unknown, capabilities unknown. On board the flagship Emperor's Will, Zarthek received the news while standing in his private chambers, staring out at the stars through a massive viewing port. For the first time in his 6th century military career, he felt something that had been alien to him for hundreds of years. Uncertainty. He summoned his senior staff immediately. Within an hour, the flagship's main briefing room was filled with the Empire's most experienced military commanders and intelligence officers. Report, Zarthek commanded simply. Admiral Kexvar presented the findings from Luna Construction Facility, while other officers added similar discoveries from across human space. The picture that emerged was terrifying in its implications. The humans have been preparing for this war far longer than we realized, Kexvar concluded. Based on what we found, they began building their secret infrastructure at least a decade ago, possibly longer. But our intelligence services monitored human military development closely, protested Intelligence Director Vokdar. We had agents throughout their government and military. None of them reported anything like this. Then either your agents were incompetent, Zarthek said coldly, or the humans were better at counterintelligence than you believed. The Emperor turned to study a holographic display showing the current positions of Vex Heron forces across human space. Suddenly, those positions looked less like a conquering army, and more like scattered outposts in hostile territory. What about the human populations, he asked. Our occupation forces report that civilian compliance has been excellent. No resistance movements, no sabotage attempts. That's correct, Majesty, confirmed General Tekvar, who commanded the ground occupation forces. The human civilians have been completely cooperative. Almost suspiciously so. Suspiciously. They're too calm, Majesty. Too accepting of occupation. Most conquered species show at least some resentment, some cultural resistance to imperial authority. The humans act as if they expected this to happen. Emperor Zarthek was beginning to understand the true meaning of Ambassador Chen's cryptic words. The humans hadn't been fighting to win the war. They had been fighting to lose it in exactly the right way. Bring me the human diplomat, he ordered. Immediately. Chen was escorted to the briefing room under heavy guard. When she entered, she found herself facing the entire senior command structure of the Vex Heron occupation force. Their expressions ranged from anger to confusion to barely controlled fear. Ambassador Chen, Emperor Zarthek said without preamble. "We have discovered your secret shipyards. We know about the fleet you've been building." Chen looked genuinely surprised. "What fleet, Your Imperial Majesty? Do not attempt to deceive us further. We have seen the construction facilities, the technical specifications, the production logs. Where are these ships now?" Chen was quiet for a moment as if considering her response. "Your Imperial Majesty, I'm just a diplomat. I wouldn't know anything about secret military projects. You were also listed as the colonial administrator who authorized many of these operations." "Was I?" Chen looked thoughtful. "I suppose I did sign a lot of paperwork over the years. It's hard to keep track of every administrative detail." The Emperor's patience was wearing thin. "You will tell us the location of your fleet." "What fleet?" Chen asked again, but this time her tone was different. There was something in her voice that made every Vex Heron in the room tense. "The fleet your species has been building in secret for the past decade." Chen nodded slowly. "Ah, that fleet. The one you're worried about." "Yes. The one that could potentially threaten your occupation forces if it actually existed and was deployed against you." "Where is it?" Chen looked around the room at the assembled Vex Heron officers. "Your Imperial Majesty, that's an excellent question. Where do you think a secret fleet would be most effective?" Emperor Zarthek felt his blood freeze as the implications hit him. "You're saying the fleet is already deployed?" "I'm not saying anything, Your Imperial Majesty. You're drawing your own conclusions." The Emperor turned to his intelligence officers. "Scan all space within 100 light-years of human territory. I want every ship, every asteroid, every piece of space debris identified and tracked." "Yes, Majesty." As the officers hurried from the room to implement the orders, Zarthek found himself alone with Chen and her guards. The human diplomat stood calmly, her hands clasped behind her back, waiting. "How long?" the Emperor asked finally. "How long what, Your Imperial Majesty? How long have you been planning this?" Chen smiled. "Your Imperial Majesty, humanity has been aware of the Vex Heron Empire for over 50 years. We've been watching you conquer species after species, studying your tactics, learning your strengths and weaknesses. Did you really think we would wait passively for you to arrive at our borders? So the entire war was a deception." "Not a deception, Your Imperial Majesty. A performance. We played the role you expected us to play. The young, aggressive species that would fight conventionally and lose conventionally. You needed to believe you had achieved a total victory." "Why?" "Because, Your Imperial Majesty, the only way to defeat an empire that has never lost a war is to make them think they've won one." The Emperor stared at her for a long moment. "What happens now?" Chen's smile widened. "Now, Your Imperial Majesty, you get to find out what kind of war we were actually prepared to fight." As if summoned by her words, an alarm began sounding throughout the flagship. Emergency lights bathed the briefing room in red as the ship's communication system crackled to life. "Your Imperial Majesty, this is the bridge. We're receiving priority transmissions from fleet commanders across human space. All of them are reporting the same thing." "Report," Zarthek commanded. "Ship's Majesty." "Hundreds of them. Appearing on sensors throughout the occupation zone. Unknown configuration, unknown capabilities. They're not attacking, but they're making their presence known." Chen nodded approvingly. "Right on schedule." Emperor Zarthek looked at the human diplomat with something approaching respect. "You planned all of this." "Not me personally, Your Imperial Majesty. But yes, this was planned. Every detail, every contingency, every possible outcome. We've been preparing for this moment for a very long time." The Emperor turned to his guards. "Escort the ambassador back to her cell, and double the security around her." As Chen was led away, she called back over her shoulder. "Your Imperial Majesty, you might want to check on your supply lines, and your communication networks, and your fuel depots. Oh, and you should probably make sure your ships can still trust their own computer systems." The doors closed behind her, leaving Emperor Zarthek alone with the growing realization that his greatest military triumph had actually been the opening move in humanity's real strategy. The Vex Heron Empire was about to learn what happened when prey evolved into predators. The first system failure occurred at 347 hours. Imperial Standard Time. Commander Dexhull was monitoring the night shift aboard the orbital platform above the human colony world of New Geneva, when every screen on the bridge suddenly went dark. For exactly 30 seconds, the station's primary computer systems were completely offline. When they came back online, Everything appeared normal, except for one small detail that Dexhole almost missed. The security rotation schedules had been changed. Instead of the normal 8-hour shifts, the computer had automatically implemented 12-hour rotations. When Dexhole tried to change them back, the system informed him that he lacked sufficient authorization. Chief Technical Officer Lexmar, he called over the internal communication system, report to the bridge immediately. Lexmar arrived within minutes carrying a portable diagnostic unit. What seems to be the problem, Commander? The computer has locked me out of the security rotation protocols. Says I don't have authorization to make changes. The technical officer plugged his diagnostic unit into the main computer interface. That's strange. According to the system logs, your authorization codes were revoked 20 minutes ago by someone with administrator-level access. Who has administrator access on this station? Lexmar checked the authorization database. Only you, sir, and that's odd. What? There's another administrator account in the system. Account name Maintenance Protocol 77 Alpha, but that wasn't there yesterday. I run daily checks on all user accounts. Dexhole felt a chill of recognition. Mining Directive 77 Alpha had been the mysterious protocol they'd discovered on Kepler 442b. Now there was a maintenance protocol with the same designation. Can you trace when this account was created? Checking now, sir. Lexmar worked at his diagnostic unit for several minutes. This is impossible, Commander. According to the creation logs, this account was established when the station's computer system was first installed. But that was 3 years ago before we captured this system. You're saying the humans built a backdoor into their own computer systems? It looks like they built backdoors into everything, sir. Over the next 6 hours, similar reports flooded into Vex Heron command centers across human space. Computer systems that had been functioning normally suddenly developed mysterious administrative accounts that couldn't be deleted or modified. Security protocols were being changed without authorization. Access codes were being revoked and reissued, but the computer problems were just the beginning. On the supply depot at Ross 128, Quartermaster Gextol discovered that his inventory management system had been gradually redistributing supplies for the past 2 weeks. Critical military equipment had been reclassified as surplus and transferred to storage facilities that didn't exist. When he tried to trace the missing supplies, the computer informed him that they had been disposed of according to regulations that he couldn't access or verify. At the fuel processing station orbiting Proxima Centauri, Chief Engineer Wextall found that the refinery had been producing a grade of fuel that was subtly different from Vex Heron specifications. The change was so small that it wouldn't be noticed without detailed chemical analysis, but it was significant enough to potentially damage Vex Heron ship engines over time. How long has this been going on? He asked the facility's computer. Fuel Mixture Optimization Protocol 77 Alpha has been active for 6 months. 2 weeks and 1 day, the computer replied. Show me the authorization for this protocol. Access denied. Protocol 77 Alpha requires ultra-classification clearance. Wextall tried every access code he had, including emergency override commands. The computer refused to provide any information about the mysterious protocol. But the most disturbing discovery came from the communication relay station on Europa. Lieutenant Vexnor was performing routine maintenance on the primary communication array when he noticed unusual data, packets being transmitted through the system. The packets were encrypted and routed through multiple relay points, making them almost impossible to trace. Supervisor Kextal, he called over the intercom, I'm detecting unauthorized communications traffic through our primary array. Supervisor Kextal arrived at the communication center within minutes. Show me. Vexnor brought up the traffic analysis displays. There, see those data bursts? They're happening every 4 hours, exactly on schedule. High-level encryption, multiple routing protocols. Someone is using our communication system to send messages across the galaxy. Can you decode the transmissions? I've tried, Supervisor. The encryption is unlike anything I've seen before. It's not just complex, it's adaptive. Every time I think I've found a pattern, the encryption changes. Kextal studied the displays with growing alarm. How long has this been going on? According to the logs, these transmissions started the day after we captured this station. But that's the weird part. There's no record of anyone authorizing the use of our communication array for these Transmissions. Check the authorization. Codes. Vexnor pulled up the transmission logs. Every packet is authorized by someone called Communication Protocol 77 Alpha. But that account doesn't exist in our user database. The pattern was becoming clear across the occupied territories. Every critical system that the Vex Haran relied upon had been quietly compromised. Supply chains were being disrupted, fuel was being contaminated, communications were being intercepted and rerouted, and computer systems were being controlled by ghost accounts that couldn't be traced or eliminated, but Emperor Zarthek's worst fears were confirmed when the first ship malfunctions began, the heavy cruiser. Subjugator's Wrath was patrolling the outer edge of the Sol system when its navigation computer suddenly locked onto a course heading directly toward the nearest star. Captain Mexivil tried to override the navigation system, but the computer informed him that the new course was authorized by Navigation Protocol 77 Alpha and could not be changed. Emergency manual override procedures failed because the ship's computer refused to recognize the manual commands. Only by completely shutting down the navigation system and switching to backup sensors was Captain Mexivil able to regain control of his vessel. Similar incidents occurred throughout the Vex Haran fleet. Ships suddenly found their weapon systems locked in safe mode. Life support systems began implementing efficiency protocols that reduced oxygen levels to uncomfortable but not dangerous levels. Communication arrays started broadcasting static on all frequencies. The malfunctions were never life-threatening, but they were constant, unpredictable, and impossible to fix permanently. As soon as Vex Haran technicians corrected one problem, another would appear somewhere else. On board the flagship Emperor's Will, Zarthek convened an emergency meeting of his senior staff. The vast briefing room felt smaller somehow, as if the walls were closing in around them. "Report," he commanded, though he already knew the situation was dire. Admiral Kexvar spoke first. "Your Imperial Majesty, we are experiencing systematic failures across all occupied territories. Computer systems, supply networks, communication arrays, even our own ships, everything is being compromised. Can we regain control?" Chief Technical Officer Bexmal stepped forward. "We've tried everything, Majesty. The humans appear to have embedded control protocols throughout their entire infrastructure, protocols that we cannot override, modify, or eliminate. What about replacing their computer systems with our own?" "We've attempted that, Majesty, but their systems are so integrated that replacing them would require rebuilding their entire technological infrastructure from scratch. It would take years, and we don't have the resources for a project of that magnitude." Emperor Zarthek turned to his intelligence chief. "Director Vakhdar, how is this possible? How did our intelligence services miss an operation of this scope?" Intelligence Director Vakhdar looked uncomfortable. "Your Imperial Majesty, I've been reviewing our intelligence files on humanity. We may have made some fundamental errors in our assessment of their capabilities." "Explain." "Our agents within human space reported that they had access to civilian and military computer networks, government communications, even some classified research projects. We believed we had comprehensive intelligence on human technological development. But it appears that the humans were feeding us information about their conventional military capabilities, while hiding their true technological advancement. Everything our agents saw was real, but it wasn't complete. They showed us the war they wanted us to prepare for, not the war they were actually preparing to fight." The Emperor absorbed this information in silence. Around the briefing table, his officers waited for orders that he wasn't sure he could give. "What about the mysterious fleet?" he asked finally. "Have we located their ships?" "No, Majesty," Admiral Kexavar admitted. "Our long-range sensors have detected energy signatures throughout human space, but we cannot get clear readings on ship numbers or positions. It's as if they're using some kind of stealth technology we don't understand." "Or," interrupted a new voice, "they're not hiding at all." Everyone in the room turned to see Ambassador Chen standing in the doorway, flanked by 2 guards. She had been brought to the briefing room on the Emperor's orders, but her timing made it seem as if she had been listening to their conversation. "Explain," Zarthek commanded. Chen walked calmly to the center of the room. "Your Imperial Majesty, you keep talking about our mysterious fleet as if it's hiding somewhere waiting to attack. But what if it's not hiding? What if it's right in front of you? Our sensors show only Vex Haran vessels in this area." Your sensors show what our computer systems tell them to show, Chen replied. Every piece of technology you're using to manage this occupation was built by humans, programmed by humans, and maintained by humans. How can you be certain that your sensors are giving you accurate information? The implications of her words hit the assembled officers like a physical blow. If the humans could control Vexharan computer systems, they could also control sensor networks, communication arrays, navigation systems, everything the Vexharan military relied upon. You're saying our own equipment is compromised, the Emperor said slowly. I'm saying that you're occupying a technological infrastructure that was designed to be controlled by people who are no longer loyal to you. Every computer system, every automated process, every digital component in your occupation force is potentially working against you. Then we'll replace everything with our own technology. Chen shook her head. Your Imperial Majesty, you have millions of soldiers spread across hundreds of worlds, all dependent on infrastructure that took humanity decades to build. You don't have the resources to replace it all, and even if you did, you don't have the time. Time for what? Time before the real war begins. As if summoned by her words, alarms began sounding throughout the flagship. Emergency lights bathed the briefing room in red as urgent messages flooded the communication system. Your Imperial Majesty, came a panicked voice from the bridge. We're receiving reports from fleet commanders across the occupation zone. Ships are appearing throughout human space. Hundreds of them, thousands. Zarthek rushed to the nearest tactical display. The holographic map of human space was filling with red dots. Enemy contacts appearing faster than the display could track them. How many? He demanded. Still counting, Majesty. Preliminary estimates suggest over 3,000 vessels, various classes from destroyers to what appear to be super dreadnoughts. Chen nodded approvingly. Phase 2 begins right on schedule. The Emperor whirled to face her. What is Phase 2? Phase 1 was letting you win the conventional war and occupy our territory. Phase 2 is showing you what you actually conquered. On the tactical display, the red dots representing human ships were moving into attack formations around every major Vexharan position. But they weren't attacking. They were simply making their presence known, demonstrating that the Vexharan occupation force was completely surrounded and outnumbered by at least 3-1. Your Imperial Majesty, Chen continued, for the past 3 years you've been fighting the human military. For the next phase you'll be fighting the human species. Every civilian who smiled and cooperated with your occupation forces. Every technician who helped repair your equipment. Every administrator who processed your supply requests. Every person who had access to your computer systems. The Emperor felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Genuine fear. Not for his own life, but for the survival of his empire. What do you want? He asked quietly. Chen smiled. That, Your Imperial Majesty, is an excellent question. But I think you'll find the answer more interesting than you expect. As if responding to her words, every screen in the briefing room flickered and displayed the same message. Phase 3 begins in 72 hours. Prepare for negotiations. The message was signed, the human species. Emperor Zarthek realized that he was no longer dealing with a conquered enemy. He was facing something that had never existed before in galactic history, an entire species that had weaponized the very act of surrender. 72 hours later, Emperor Zarthek stood once again in his throne room. But everything had changed. The vast chamber that had once symbolized the absolute power of the Vexharan Empire now felt like a trap. Every piece of technology in the room, the communication systems, the holographic displays, even the environmental controls, had been built using components that passed through human space at some point in their manufacturing process. After 3 days of system failures, mysterious malfunctions, and impossible technical problems, Zarthek was no longer certain that anything in his empire was truly under his control. Ambassador Chen entered the throne room without guards. They were no longer necessary. Over the past 72 hours, it had become clear that she was far more powerful as a prisoner than most people were as rulers. Your Imperial Majesty, she said with a respectful bow. Thank you for agreeing to these negotiations. Did I have a choice? Zarthek replied. Around them, the throne room was filled with Vexharan nobles and military officers, but also with figures that had not been there before, humans who had revealed themselves to be embedded throughout the imperial court structure. There are always choices, Your Imperial Majesty. That's what this conversation is about. Chen walked to the center of the vast room and activated a portable holographic projector. The device cast a three-dimensional map of the galaxy into the air above their heads, showing the current positions of Vexharan and human forces. Let me explain what has happened over the past 3 years, she began. Your Imperial Majesty believed you were conquering the human species. In reality, the human species was infiltrating the Vexharan Empire. The holographic display changed, showing data flows and communication networks stretching across Imperial space. For over 50 years since we first became aware of your empire's existence, we have been placing our people throughout your society, not as spies seeking information, but as citizens seeking to become part of your civilization. Chen gestured, and the display zoomed in on various Vexharan worlds. We studied your species, learned your languages, adopted your customs, and integrated ourselves into your communities. We became Vexharan citizens in every way except genetics. Emperor Zarthek stared at the display in growing horror. How many? Currently? Approximately 12 million humans live and work throughout your empire, Your Imperial Majesty. They serve in your military, maintain your technology, process your communications, manage your supply chains, and yes, some of them have even married into your noble houses. The implications were staggering. The Vexharan Empire contained over 200 billion citizens across thousands of worlds. But if 12 million of them were actually human agents, the war, Zarthek said slowly, the entire war was a distraction. The war was necessary, Your Imperial Majesty. You needed to believe that you had defeated us militarily, otherwise you would never have trusted us enough to let us manage your occupation of human space. Chen smiled. You see, the easiest way to take control of an empire is to become indispensable to its operation. She gestured again, and the holographic display showed the current status of Vexharan forces throughout human space. Red warning indicators covered nearly every position. Right now, every critical system your occupation force depends on is under human control. Your supply ships are being routed through distribution networks, managed by human logistics coordinators. Your communication arrays are being maintained by human technicians. Your computer systems are running software that includes human-designed components. You could destroy us, the Emperor realized. Yes, Chen agreed simply. We could crash every ship in your fleet, poison every supply depot, crash every computer system, and leave your forces stranded throughout human space with no way to return home. Within a month, your entire occupation army would be dead or captured. The throne room was absolutely silent. Every Vexharan present understood that they were not listening to surrender terms. They were listening to a victor who was choosing mercy. But that's not what we want, Chen continued. Destroying your occupation force would accomplish nothing except proving that we can destroy your occupation force. It wouldn't change anything fundamental about the relationship between our species. What do you want? Zarthek asked. Chen deactivated the holographic display and looked directly at the Emperor. We want to change the rules, Your Imperial Majesty. All of them. She began walking slowly around the throne room as she spoke, addressing not just the Emperor but all the assembled Vexharan nobles and officers. For 1,000 years, the Vexharan Empire has operated on a simple principle: might makes right. The strong conquer the weak. The advanced subjugate the primitive, the many dominate the few. This principle has allowed you to build the largest empire in galactic history. Chen paused in front of a massive display, showing the conquered worlds of the empire. But this principle has also made you predictable. Every species you've encountered has tried to defeat you using the same methods you use: military force, territorial control, technological superiority. And every species has failed because you are better at that kind of warfare than anyone else. Until now, the Emperor said quietly. Until now, Chen agreed, because we didn't try to beat you at your own game. We changed the game entirely. She returned to the center of the room. The rule I spoke of 3 days ago, the one you break when your survival depends on it, isn't about breaking laws or violating treaties. It's about breaking assumptions. Your assumption was that we would fight you the way everyone else has fought you. And instead we spent 50 years becoming you. We learned your language, adopted your culture, integrated into your society. By the time you arrived at our borders, we weren't just defending human space, we were defending our home throughout your empire. The implications were still sinking in for the assembled Vexharan leadership. Chen could see understanding dawning in their faces as they realized that everything they thought they knew about their empire might be wrong. "This is impossible," protested Admiral Kexvar. "Our security services would have detected infiltration on this scale." Chen nodded to one of the humans who had revealed themselves in the throne room. "Admiral, I'd like you to meet Director Lul Shan of your Imperial Intelligence Service. She's been managing counterintelligence operations for your empire for the past 15 years. The woman stepped forward and bowed to the Emperor. "Your Imperial Majesty, my real name is Director Lisa Shanahan, and I've been working to protect human assets within your empire since I graduated from our intelligence academy 22 years ago." Admiral Kexvar stared at her in shock. "You've been reporting to me for over a decade. I trusted you with the most sensitive operations in the empire. And I've carried out those operations faithfully, Admiral, protecting Imperial security, identifying real threats, maintaining the stability of your intelligence networks. The only difference is that I've also been ensuring that human assets were never accidentally exposed by your investigations." Emperor Zarthek felt the foundation of his worldview crumbling. "How many others? How many of my trusted advisors are actually human agents?" "Your Imperial Majesty," Chen said gently. "That's the wrong question. The right question is, does it matter?" "What do you mean?" "I mean that every human serving in your empire has been doing their job faithfully for years or decades. They've protected Imperial citizens, maintained Imperial infrastructure, defended Imperial interests, and contributed to Imperial prosperity. They've been good citizens of your empire." Chen walked closer to the throne. "The only difference between them and your other citizens is genetic. In every other way that matters, loyalty to their communities, dedication to their work, commitment to the welfare of the people around them, they've been exemplary Imperial citizens. But they're loyal to humanity first, are they?" Chen asked. "Director Shanahan, where do you consider home?" The intelligence director thought for a moment before answering. "I was born on Earth, Your Imperial Majesty, but I've lived on Vexhara Prime for 20 years. My husband is Vexharan, my children are half human and half Vexharan, and my life is built around the community I serve. If someone forced me to choose between the abstract concept of human independence and the concrete reality of protecting the Vexharan families I work with every day, that would be an impossible choice," Chen nodded. "And that, Your Imperial Majesty, is exactly why this situation doesn't have to end in mutual destruction." She activated her holographic projector again, but this time the display showed something different. Instead of military positions and strategic assets, it showed demographic data, economic networks, cultural exchanges, and social connections. "This is what 50 years of integration actually looks like," Chen explained. 12 million humans live throughout your empire, but they're not isolated agents working for a foreign power. They're integrated citizens with Vexharan spouses, mixed species children, local community ties, and personal investments in Imperial prosperity. The display zoomed in on specific examples. Dr. Marcus Chen Velmore manages the primary medical facility on Thalos 7th. His wife is Vexharan. His 3 children consider themselves Imperial citizens, and he's dedicated his career to improving healthcare for everyone in his sector. If Earth declared war on the Vexharan Empire tomorrow, which side do you think he would choose? Emperor Zarthek studied the displays with growing fascination. "You're saying your people have become our people. I'm saying that the distinction between your people and our people has become meaningless in many cases. That's what happens when species integrate, rather than simply conquering each other." Chen deactivated the display and addressed the assembled leadership directly. "Your Imperial Majesty, the Vexharan Empire has spent 1,000 years proving that it can conquer anyone who opposes it. But humanity is offering you the chance to prove something more impressive, that your empire can evolve." "Evolve how?" "From an empire that rules through conquest to an empire that grows through cooperation. From a civilization that demands submission to a civilization that invites participation." The throne room was silent as the Vexharan leadership absorbed the implications of what Chen was proposing. "You're asking us to abandon everything that has made our empire strong," said General Tekvar. "I'm asking you to build on what has made your empire strong," Chen replied. "Your organizational abilities, your technological achievements, your capacity for managing vast, diverse populations, these are genuine strengths. But the method you've used to acquire new territories and populations is inefficient. Inefficient? Consider the resources you've spent conquering the 47 species in your empire. The military campaigns, the occupation forces, the ongoing security operations needed to maintain control over unwilling populations. Now consider how much more efficient it would be if those populations were willing partners rather than conquered subjects. Chen walked to the massive viewing port that dominated one wall of the throne room. Through it, they could see the Vexharan fleet still maintaining position around Earth, but also the much larger human fleet that had revealed itself over the past few days. Humanity is offering the Vexharan Empire a new model for expansion, she said. Instead of conquering species, invite them to join. Instead of imposing your will through force, demonstrate the benefits of cooperation. Instead of ruling through fear, govern through competence and fairness. Emperor Zarthek joined her at the viewing port. And if we refuse? Then we'll have demonstrated that peaceful coexistence is impossible, and we'll be forced to defend ourselves accordingly. But I don't think it will come to that. Why not? Chen smiled. Because, Your Imperial Majesty, you're not actually a conqueror. You're an administrator. For 6 centuries, you've been managing the largest, most complex multi-species civilization in galactic history. The conquest part was just how you acquired new territories to manage. But if you could acquire new territories through peaceful means, you'd be free to focus on what you're actually good at, making diverse populations prosperous and stable. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the 2 fleets facing each other in space. What exactly are you proposing? A new kind of empire, Your Imperial Majesty. One based on voluntary membership rather than conquest. Species that want to join the Vexharan Empire would be welcome to do so, with full rights and representation. Species that prefer independence would be free to maintain their sovereignty, but would be invited to participate in trade, cultural exchange, and mutual defense agreements. And humanity? Humanity would like to become the first species to join the Vexharan Empire as equal partners, rather than conquered subjects. We would contribute our technological innovations, our human resources already integrated throughout your society, and our experience with rapid adaptation and integration. Chen turned from the viewing port to face the Emperor directly. Your Imperial Majesty, you have the opportunity to transform the largest empire in galactic history into the largest voluntary confederation in galactic history. Instead of being remembered as the last great conqueror, you could be remembered as the first great unifier. Emperor Zarthek considered her words carefully. Around the throne room, his advisors and nobles were watching him, waiting for his decision. The choice he made in the next few minutes would determine not just the fate of the current crisis, but the future direction of Vexharan civilization. Ambassador Chen, he said finally, I have one question. Yes, Your Imperial Majesty. If we agree to this new model, how can we be certain that other species won't attempt to infiltrate and manipulate us the way humanity has done? Chen smiled. Your Imperial Majesty, that's the beauty of voluntary cooperation. If species choose to join your empire because they want to be part of it, they won't need to infiltrate it. They'll be building it together with you. She paused. Besides, the methods humanity used only worked because your empire was based on conquest and subjugation. If you create an empire based on cooperation and mutual benefit, infiltration becomes pointless. Why would anyone want to secretly control something they can openly participate in improving? The Emperor nodded slowly. And the rule you spoke of? The one that matters most? The rule that matters most, Your Imperial Majesty, isn't about winning or losing, conquering or being conquered. It's about choosing the kind of civilization you want to build when you have the power to build any kind of civilization you want. Chen looked around the throne room at the assembled Vexharan leadership. You have that power now. The question is, what will you choose to do with it? 6 months later, Emperor Zarthek stood in the same throne room, but it had been transformed. The massive space now served as a meeting hall for the newly formed Galactic Cooperative Council, with representatives from over 60 species participating in discussions about trade agreements, cultural exchange programs, and mutual defense treaties. Ambassador Sarah Chen, now serving as humanity's representative to the council, approached the Emperor's platform where he stood reviewing the agenda for the day's sessions. Your Imperial Majesty, she said with a bow. The morning sessions went well. The Zektar delegation is interested in joining the Cooperative Trade Network. and the Mistral Dawn representatives want to discuss establishing educational exchange programs. Zarthek nodded approvingly. And the integration of our military forces? Proceeding smoothly. Admiral Kexavar reports that the joint training exercises between human and Vexharan crews are exceeding all expectations. It turns out our species have complementary tactical philosophies. The Emperor smiled, an expression that had become more common since the transformation of his empire. Who would have thought that voluntary cooperation could be more effective than forced compliance? Chen returned his smile. Anyone who understood the most important rule, Your Imperial Majesty, which is that the strongest civilizations aren't built by forcing others to submit to your will. They're built by convincing others that your will and their will can be the same thing. As if to illustrate her point, a group of mixed-species children ran through the throne room, laughing as they chased each other in a game that had no rules except joy. Human children, Vexharan children, Zektar children, and others, all playing together without any awareness that their species had once been enemies. Emperor Zarthek watched them with something approaching wonder. Do you think it will last? This cooperation between species? Your Imperial Majesty, Chen replied. I think those children will grow up in a galaxy where cooperation between species isn't unusual or remarkable. It will just be the way things are. And when they're adults, they'll teach their children the same thing. She paused, watching the children disappear around a corner, their laughter echoing in the vast space. That's how you really conquer a galaxy, Your Imperial Majesty. Not by defeating your enemies, but by making sure the next generation doesn't have any. The Emperor nodded slowly. The rule that matters most. The rule that matters most. Outside the throne room, the galaxy continued its ancient dance around distant stars, but something fundamental had changed. Ships bearing the symbols of dozens of different species moved freely between systems that had once been separated by military borders. Trade routes that had been disrupted by centuries of conquest were reopening. Scientific research stations were being established as joint ventures between species that had never worked together before. The transformation hadn't been without challenges. Some Vexharan nobles had struggled to accept the loss of their privileged status over conquered peoples. Some human factions had argued that they should have pressed their advantage and demanded the complete dissolution of the empire. Representatives from other species had initially been suspicious of what seemed too good to be true, but the practical benefits of cooperation had gradually overcome ideological resistance. Worlds that had spent generations suffering under military occupation were now prospering as full partners in a galactic economy. Technologies that had been restricted to the Vexharan elite were now being shared and improved through collaborative research. Cultural exchanges were creating art, music, and literature that no single species could have produced alone. Chen walked to the viewing port and looked out at the orbital platforms surrounding the capital world. Construction crews made up of workers from a dozen different species were building new facilities designed to accommodate the growing cooperative council. The architecture was unlike anything that had existed before, a blend of aesthetic principles from multiple civilizations, creating structures that seemed to belong to all of them, simultaneously. Ambassador, came a voice behind her. Chen turned to see Director Lisa Shanahan approaching, carrying a datapad with the day's intelligence briefings. Over the past 6 months, Shanahan had transitioned from secretly protecting human assets within the Empire to openly coordinating security for the new Cooperative Council. What's the situation report, Director? Mostly positive news. The Heptari Republic has formally requested membership in the Cooperative. The Talon Confederacy wants to establish a trade embassy, and we've received preliminary inquiries from 12 more species about the possibility of joining. Chen smiled. Any problems? Nothing major. There are still some Vexharan military commanders who are uncomfortable with the integration protocols, and we've detected some pirate activity in the outer rim sectors. Apparently some criminal organizations are trying to take advantage of the reduced military patrols. Recommendations? For the military integration issues, I suggest more joint training exercises and cultural exchange programs between human and Vexharan units. For the piracy problem, we should coordinate a multi-species task force to patrol the trade routes. Chen nodded. Make it happen. What else? Shanahan hesitated. There's one more thing. We've received a communication from a species calling themselves the Kronar Dominion. They're located about 200 light-years from our nearest border, and they're concerned about our expansion. Concerned how? They seem to think that the Cooperative Council is just the Vexharan Empire with better marketing. They're worried that we're going to try to force them to join our alliance. Chen considered this. What do we know about them? Preliminary intelligence suggests they're a militaristic society with a strong tradition of independence. They've successfully resisted Vexharan expansion for over 3 centuries, and they're not inclined to trust any large interstellar organization. Understandable, Chen replied. What does the Emperor think? He wants to send a diplomatic mission to explain our new policies and demonstrate that we have no intention of forcing anyone to join the cooperative. Good idea. Who's he sending? Shanahan smiled. He suggested that you might be the best choice for the mission. Chen laughed. Of course he did. When do I leave? Next week, if you're willing to take the assignment. I'm willing. But I want to take a mixed crew. Humans, Vexharan, and representatives from some of our newer member species. If we're going to convince the Kronar Dominion that we're really different from the old empire, we need to show them what cooperation actually looks like. As Shanahan left to make the arrangements, Chen returned to the viewing port. The sight of ships from dozens of different species working together in the space around the capital world still amazed her. 6 months ago, most of these species had been enemies or strangers. Now they were partners in building something that had never existed before. She thought about the upcoming mission to the Kronar Dominion. It would be a test of everything they had accomplished so far. Could they convince a suspicious militaristic species that voluntary cooperation was better than forced isolation? Could they demonstrate that the Cooperative Council was genuinely different from the conquest-based empires that had dominated galactic history? Chen believed they could, but she also knew that it would require the same careful planning, patient diplomacy, and long-term thinking that had made the transformation of the Vexharan Empire possible. The rule that mattered most, choosing what kind of civilization to build when you had the power to build any kind, would need to be demonstrated over and over again until it became the new standard for how species interacted with each other. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of the council chambers as representatives from across the galaxy worked together to solve problems that affected all of them. Children's laughter echoed from the educational facilities where young people from dozens of species learned together. The quiet hum of construction equipment spoke of a future being built by willing hands rather than forced labor. Emperor Zarthek joined her at the viewing port, and together they watched the ships coming and going from the orbital platforms. Nervous about the Kronar mission? He asked. Not nervous, Chen replied. Determined. If we can convince one more species that cooperation is better than conquest, we'll have proven that this new model can work with anyone. And if we can't, Chen smiled, then we'll have learned something important about the limits of diplomacy, and we'll adjust our approach accordingly. That's what learning civilizations do, they adapt. The Emperor nodded. The rule that matters most. The rule that matters most, Chen agreed. As the day cycle turned toward evening, the capital world's primary star cast long shadows across the orbital platforms. But the lights of construction continued, and the communications traffic between ships never paused. The galaxy was waking up to the possibility that different species could work together as equals, rather than as conquerors and conquered. It wasn't the ending that anyone had expected when the Vexharan Empire first arrived at humanity's borders 3 years earlier. But it was the ending that had become possible when both species chose to break the rule that had governed galactic civilization for millennia. The rule that might makes right had been replaced by a new rule, that cooperation makes everyone stronger. And in the laughter of mixed species children playing together in the corridors of what had once been a throne room built for conquest, the future of the galaxy was being written by small hands that had never known a time when different species were enemies. The only rule that mattered had finally become the rule that everyone chose to follow.